Welcome to the Gleaner Studios, Minister Teixeira, the Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance in the new administration of President Irfan Ali. Thank you so much for joining me, Minister.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
How are you?
Well, after the 5 months in the struggle we had to prevail to protect democracy, we feel very, very relieved, and there's an enormous amount of work we're doing. We're working 24/7. As President Ali said, once the elections were declared, we were to hit the road running, and that's exactly what we're doing. So it's been enormously hectic.
It has been. You speak of a struggle. One of the first things I want to put to you is whether, people want to know whether what's going on now with, for example, the Ghana Electoral Commission, if it's a persecution or prosecution. We've seen the arrest of a number of staff members there, and we're wondering, is this political victimization being entertained by the new administration?
No, I think it's a very clear-cut issue. And by the way, I want to thank Jamaica as a country and the Jamaican people and Jamaican government and opposition for supporting us in those 5 months, where we struggled to have a declaration of results that were based on the will of the people. And we were supported by 100 countries throughout the world and all the major international bodies such as the UN, the OES, the Commonwealth, and the Caricom. So I must give our appreciation on behalf of Guyana and President Ali. In relation to the question you asked, no, it's not persecution. And I think it's an international norm and understood in international law that if one tries to steal elections or to commit fraud in elections, it's considered a serious crime. And clearly what happened from March the 5th right through to just on the eve of August the 2nd was an attempt to steal the will of the Guyanese people. And the courts ruled over and over again that the statements of poll had to be used. The attempts to block the recount were also, the court ruled that it could not be done. The recount was held and it ended on June the 9th. And yet we waited as a people patiently and non-violently until the declaration finally on August the 2nd. I wonder how many countries in the world, if this had happened, that the people would have been as peaceful as we were for 5 months under extreme pressure. So that, no, it's not persecution. The officials in GCOM, with others in the then government, tried to steal the elections. And therefore, that's an election offense. It's under the laws of Guyana, it's an election offense, as I'm sure it is in Jamaica and in the entire democratic world. Those who were responsible for derailing or attempting to have an electoral coup have to face the consequences, and that will go through the investigations and the prosecution as well as the courts. The court will have the final say on this matter, and therefore the Chief Elections Officer, Mr. Lowenfield, violated the court orders of the CCJ, of the Chief Justice, of the Court of Appeal, of the Chairman of GCOM, consistently for 5 months. And therefore, why is this to be accepted? Why must the Guyanese people say, well, okay, let's leave it as it is and continue? It cannot be. Guyana went on the world stage as the only country in the world which took 5 months to have a declaration of its elections. No other democratic country, and in fact, not even a dictatorial country, had that reputation. And we cannot, as a country, tolerate such efforts to steal the will of the people, which is a constitutional right. And so this is prosecution, and the prosecution will find whatever they have to find, the police will find whatever they have to find, and the matter will go to court. And if the evidence is substantiated, the court will rule accordingly. We're not telling the court how to rule. What we're saying as a people and as a government and the democratic forces in Guyana, the other smaller parties, the civil society, this is not a PPP issue. It is a people of Guyana. So that we will not tolerate anybody attempting to steal the will of the people.
So you're saying that your government or your administration does not believe in the call by the opposition leader for the chairman of GCOM to resign in light of these issues?
the opposition is making many claims, one of which is the government is illegitimate. So they're not even recognizing our government after all the 5 months, and they recount and so on. And they're doing what they're entitled to go to election petition. We went to election petition in 2015 and it hasn't been heard up to now, 5 years later. And what blocked it was the same Mr. Lowenfield, who was the chief elections officer then and now, who blocked our case in court when the Chief Justice ruled our petition was in order and should be heard, and blocked it again at the Court of Appeal of Guyana, where up to now the Court of Appeal has not ruled. So the opposition has a right to go to election petition. However, their view that the chairman should resign, that's an issue that the chairman has to make of her own accord. There is nothing in the Constitution, electoral laws, that call for the removal of the chairman other than by the commission itself. It is a constitutional body and it makes its decisions as a commission. The issue of Mr. Lowenfield, he was an election official. He was not a constitutional post holder and therefore came under the control management of the commission, which is a constitutional body. So the chairman resigning is really her decision and the commission's decision. That is not our decision.
Your government is satisfied in her leadership so far?
Look, in the 5 months we went through trauma as a people, and we were like a yo-yo up and down, and the chairman ruled according to how she felt. She was being intimidated and bullied. There were threats on her life, and she ruled in accordance with the Constitution, former judge of Guyana and a high-level judge of Guyana. So our many times we felt that she could have done more than she did. She could have been firmer than she did, but we couldn't interfere. And so the chairman, whether we're satisfied or not, the final result, and having put us through the 5 months, ended up with democracy prevailing. And she, as the custodian of the votes of the Guyanese people, upheld the will of the Guyanese people. And for that reason, we must recognize that in the end, after all that we went through, that she stood and upheld the Constitution of our country. And that's all that we wanted from her, and that we expect of any chairman of the Elections Commission in Guyana.
So you're satisfied with her performance?
In totality, yes, in totality. And so the opposition has many issues that they're not happy about, and they have a right to express it. And it shows that they have a right to express it because democracy prevailed. If they had prevailed and they had kept in government, I can't say the same would be in existence for all of us on the other side of the fence.
On a related matter, the U.S. Secretary of State visited on September 17. Yes, the U.S. Secretary of State visited Guyana on September 17, and we understand that a $60 billion aid sort of a package was signed, but we've not had a lot of details on that. Are there plans to release detailed terms of the engagement in respect of the aid package?
I have not myself seen them, but what I do know that the agreements are general bilateral agreements in terms of cooperation, in terms of wishes by the government and by the U.S. administration to have stronger relations between our countries and to open doors and opportunities for trade and for loan agreements and grant agreements. And so the agreement does not go into details in that way as you're saying. And I believe it's very similar to, I can't say, that's in the office of the president, but I believe at some point they would be.
Do you think it should?
Generally, yes. Generally, yes, unless there were a matter that that would be compromising for either government, but in general, yes.
What do you say, how would you respond rather to concerns that in light of US positions and sanctions initially during the 5-month hiatus or turmoil in terms of deciding the electoral winner, and now the United States providing $60 billion in aid package, we know that the United States and is opposed to the current administration in Venezuela. We know that Guyana has a long-standing issue with Venezuela. Is there any concern that Guyana could become a pawn in this geopolitical situation?
Guyana's position has been very clear, and the PVPC in particular, that we, first of all, do not agree with unilateral interventions in other countries or interference, number one. Number two, we have always been a peace-loving country, and we have never had the military or any possibility of confronting any of our neighbors in any kind of military might. Thirdly, that we are before the International Court of Justice in relation to the border controversy between Venezuela and Guyana, and therefore we believe that these are the legal and peaceful means of going forward. The Guyana being used as some people are speculating by United States is not one that we would accept. That our country is one that where we have to continue living here. This is our nation. We have to live with our neighbors, including Venezuela. And we had trade relations with Venezuela up until Mr. Granger came into office. And Mr. Granger is the one that broke all those trade agreements that we had, which benefited both Guyanese and Venezuelans. And we believe that that kind of cooperation between our countries is critical. We would like to get back to a day where we can continue to have trade relations with Venezuela. We're a country where there are many Venezuelans coming in, both of Guyanese descent, as well as Venezuelans that are not Guyanese descent, who are coming into our country looking for assistance. And we're offering that to them as well as we can as a developing country. So that the Guyana being used, as some are speculating, is not in the realm of possibility.
Yes. Tied to that is the development of the oil industry in Guyana, and concerns as well that the United States is seeking, Guyana set to become a major oil exporter, and the United States seeking a partner, which perhaps is true for any country who wants to build bilateral relations. One of the big issues that your party and now administration campaigned on was renegotiating of the oil contracts, which it was felt were not favorable to the Guyanese people. Where can you tell us where things are at in terms of renegotiations and getting them more favorably, to use your term?
One of the issues, of course, is the production license, the production sharing agreement, which has the fiscal issues and which we criticize severely. That is the overarching agreement with Exxon and their partners to do with a majority of blocks that are right now being extracted or will be extracted. That has the main areas of fiscal concerns. In the recent one with Payara, which is a new block that was negotiated, a number of the areas that were not in the what you call the foundation document was included. And therefore, in the new blocks, we are able to negotiate and have better arrangements in terms of both disaster management, environmental impacts, and other costs and fiscal arrangements that are relative to that block. So that we had to deal with that issue because that was pending since before the government came into office. The fiscal, the main one will take a number of interventions which cannot be done in the first 6 weeks of our office. That's impossible. We had a country that was deeply in debt as a result of what APNO did. We had to go to Parliament to clear the amount of money that was spent between January and the end of July by this government unauthorizedly, of over almost $300 billion. And so we had to pass a budget. There was no budget in Guyana since 2018 December, when the 2019 budget was passed. And therefore, yes, there are issues that we will have to confront, and we will have to find what you call spatial opportunities, and to create spatial opportunities to be able to negotiate a number of the areas of the production sharing license. But right now, with just 2 months in office, we have had to deal with a major number of issues to bring a budget within 21 days so that there could be money in the country to do what is required to help our people who are suffering from COVID-19.
Well,
these were the priority issues. And that the Payara, in the meantime, had a number of technical people and international people who were able to look at it. And so This does not mean that we've closed out issues. It's just that they will be dealt with as we proceed.
Right. But
And as
COVID,
just before I forget, we have set up
yeah.
a local content panel, because one of the issues in the agreement which has to be dealt with is the local content. And the former government never really came up with a local content that was a positive for the Guyanese contractors, businessmen, and Guyanese people. And therefore that has to be totally redone. And it's in the local content policy and legislative framework, which still has to be finished, that will enhance the opportunities, training, and fiscal space, financial opportunities and economic opportunities for the Guyanese. That was missing in the agreement that APNU signed with Exxon, etc. So this is where there's an expert panel right now, including persons from Trinidad who are involved with oil. And so that will guide us in terms of local content, etc. We have to go back to Parliament to do with the Sovereign Welfare Fund, which we opposed when we were in Parliament, when we were in the opposition, and that we intend to amend or totally rewrite in terms of the role of the Minister of Finance, which was the person given the responsibility to extract from the Sovereign Welfare Fund. So those issues of the Natural Resources Fund, or what is called sovereign welfare, also is on the agenda to try to get that done before the end of the year in Parliament.
Yes, thanks, Melissa. And the COVID thing, of course, will come up. There's no way we could do an interview and did not talk about that. But before I get to that, one of the concerns raised about the contracts that were signed initially in 2015 and in 2016.
Sorry, I'm not hearing you well. I'm not hearing you well. Could you say that again, please?
Right. I'm saying one of the criticisms about the contracts signed under the previous administration were the lax regard or the poor regard for environmental regulation. Right. And we know that there is a lot of Guyana has very sensitive ecology.
Yes.
How will the concerns be represented in the new contracts or attempts at renegotiation?
In the new contract, the Payara one, which is a new one, we have embedded in that a number of issues to do with the environment, environmental assessment, including protection of the environment and also disaster management, so that has a whole element in there, a component in there, which was totally absent in the 2016 agreement. So that we made it very clear that any new blocks, any new investors have to comply with those issues. So, I mean, it is not just Guyana. The original agreement, for example, if there's an oil spill, could impact on Trinidad, Barbados, and Venezuela. And the original agreement was we had to foot the entire bill. So that with the new agreements coming on and trying to, under the original agreement, to try to now renegotiate the environmental issues and the disaster management issues. Because of course, this is not just our ecosystem, it is the entire countries surrounding us that would be impacted. Just as I assume if Trinidad has an oil spill or had an oil spill, they would be responsible for whatever happened in neighboring countries. And
does the administration have a timeline it's working with? I know you say you've just been in 2 months, and I'm sure there's a lot to go through. But does the administration have a timeline that you're working with to secure some of these major changes?
One of the things that I think is critical in Guyana is building trust and confidence, and that the involvement of people. And so the issue of local content, the issue of the involvement of the private sector, the involvement of civil society organizations in whatever we end up coming up with. And so it is not driven as the original draft done by APNU by the oil companies and their consultants who wrote the local content policy for the then government. So one of the issues is inclusion and participation involvement, and also the issue with whatever new bill or amended bill we bring to the Parliament to do with the Sovereign Welfare Fund and any other laws relating to oil and gas. And therefore, we would like to finish a number of things by the end of the year. However, what is more critical to us is that we have to have a stamp that says that Guyana and our government has been inclusive, has been able to involve civil society to be able to have comments and suggestions in relation to these major policies for Guyana, not only for this generation, but for generations to come. And therefore, this is not, if it was just driven by government alone, I think some of these things could be done faster. But I think that a number of these we're trying to see if we can complete by the end of the year. But as I said, if the consultation process requires longer to bring people on board and to be supportive, then so be it. It will happen that way.
Yes. On the matter of COVID, up to yesterday, one of the stats I saw, Guyana had 114 deaths and mounting cases.
Yes.
Criticisms about the management. What's the government's plan on doing anything different to improve the management of the coronavirus pandemic outbreak there?
The Guyana's, and from August, have been playing catch up. Unfortunately, from the time the first case was heard in Guyana, it was not managed properly. Drugs were not imported. In fact, there was an extreme shortage of drugs in Guyana and masks, and personal protection equipment for the health workers. And so from March onwards, whilst the government did close down, had curfews, etc., there was no mask policy for the public. In fact, as an opposition, we sold voluntarily 200,000 masks to distribute in our country in that 5-month period. We did it actually 1 month. So that there was very little contact tracing, although the government had several thousand kits available. And so when we got into office, it was really to hit the road running, as I said. And therefore, we've had to purchase go out to purchase drugs for treatment of persons who are very ill with COVID. We've had contact tracing. So that is why, whilst you use the number of 114 deaths as of yesterday, and you're correct, what changes is that of August the 2nd, we had only about 2,000 plus people tested. We're right now reaching over 15,000 people tested. So that if you're not testing, then you don't know what is the level of infection rate in your country. And the interior areas, which are mainly populated by our indigenous people, were totally neglected in terms of testing, in terms of equipment, in terms of drugs, etc. So that we've had to catch up between August the 6th, when the minister was appointed, to now. And so that's why you see this huge increase in testing, and also we've been able to, with help, to be able to get our testing time to be reduced for what was 7 days to now it is within 48 hours, etc. And to do the contract tracing, which was not being done before. So that's the issue of really trying to get a handle on how great is the infection rate in the society. The second thing was to do with making sure hospitals and health workers were given protection equipment. That has vastly improved. The third issue is making sure that drugs were in the country for the treatment of persons who are ill, not just with COVID, but the conditions that go along with it. And so there's been a major importation, purchase and importation of these drugs. Then you have the issue of education, information, advertisements, commercials, using the social media in particular so as to reach people in faraway areas, as well as your standard posters and flyers and ads on television and radio. Because Guyana is a country with a vast interior where radio communication, meaning not radio in the normal sense, but radio that sends messages into the interior, as well as Wi-Fi where it's available. So that we've had that. We've also had to beef up the ICU and the treatment of persons with ventilators to try to save people's lives. Yeah. So that we've had an enormous task, and we're not surprised by the fact that as we test more people, we're finding more people. Of course, the curfew hours have been changed in the 2 months, and that we're trying to slowly open back the country. Yeah. But masks are absolutely required. They're mandatory that they must be worn. And the airlines are hopefully, Caribbean Airlines will be returning to Guyana, I understand, on October
So
22nd.
a quick question then, Minister, and thank you so much for that very comprehensive outline. A quick question. Essentially what you're saying is up to August, the argument you're making is that the pandemic was being mismanaged in Guyana?
Yes, it was. And so that's why you have less than 2,000 people tested in 5 months. And you find a small number of people. In fact, wasn't relatively small percentage-wise. Even at that point, we were showing about a 25% infection rate about the small numbers that were increased, were found. So, yes.
Please finish the thought. Please finish.
No, I think that we are hoping that we will plateau. We are at a certain point so that we can begin to reduce the cases. Of course, people, I think maybe, I don't know if Jamaica has the problem we have, but our people feel that it's 5 months and they've been restricted and held back for 5 months. So they want to get out and enjoy themselves. So
I put it to you, that's the world.
We do have the struggle right now of controlling people's social activities. Yes, go ahead.
Two more issues, Minister.
Yes, go ahead.
Has your administration, your president in particular, had any discussions, dialogue with our Prime Minister, Andrew Holness, since taking office? And what
I wouldn't be able to say, but I know that President Ali has been in contact with various Caricom leaders and, of course, the head of Caricom. But I couldn't say specifically. I do know that he was calling the Prime Ministers of the Caricom to thank them each for the support they'd given us in the 5 months. So I'm aware of that, and I believe that your Prime Minister would have been contacted in that early period.
What's the position of the Ali administration on issues of Caricom? There have been questions about Guyana's commitment under the PPC to Caricom in the past. What can we expect?
I find it funny that people question Guyana's position on Caricom. I mean, Guyana meaning PPPC or Guyana as a nation. We have always valued Caricom, but we have been a rather outspoken member of Caricom in terms of how we believe that it can become a more effective organization. But we believe in regional solidarity. We believe in regional collaboration and trade. And so I find that funny because philosophically, as a party in government in particular, we have valued Caricom and valued the leaders of Caricom. But we do reserve the right, as I believe all Caricom nations would, to try to make sure that the organization is functioning effectively and more efficiently and not taking so long to do things. And I think those are criticisms that many Caricom leaders would make if you were to ask them. But I think that the body as a whole, and we're the host of Caricom country, we're the host of the headquarters here, and we'd like to continue that. So I don't believe that there's any issue of Guyana downplaying its role in Caricom or its membership in Caricom.
Any two immediate issues that Guyana, that the administration says that it is now urgently going to tackle with Caricom?
I mean, I'm not the Minister of Home Affairs and Foreign Affairs, sorry, and so these may be some of the issues you may wish to ask him. Obviously, there are a number of areas to do with trade and the common external tariff. These are issues that come up in terms of trying to make sure that our products get out there, as well as every nation has a fair share in terms of the trade relations. But I believe I cannot say at this point, and would not dare to put myself in my colleague's position to list what are the issues right now that at the Caricom level. Obviously, to give an example of our trust in the Caricom bodies, if there's any doubt, is that in the West Coast Berbice disturbances where 3 young men were killed brutally, we went to the regional body to bring, I think it's called RIMS, R-I-M-S, that came in and assisted with the investigation and the pathology tests, as well as sending the DNA results to a regional laboratory. So that, and I believe their report is now submitted, and from today's papers, they're saying that the police in Guyana are competent to do the investigation. So, I mean, if we didn't trust these bodies that we were part of setting up when we were in government and also under the former government, we have great trust in the institutions of Caricom. And so I'm surprised that anybody would think that we'd want to or to come out of Caricom or to throw Caricom out. There were passionate views by people in the social media during the 5 months before Minister Maya Motley came out publicly and headed the Caricom in a particular direction, that why was Caricom silent for so long? And so there were things in the social media that called for. But as a party in the opposition then and now in government, has never been and is not on our wavelength whatsoever.
So you'd agree that Mia Motley has breathed new life into Caricom?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I'm extraordinarily proud of her as a Caribbean woman, and okay. I'm not glad, of course, it's a woman who did it, but she has certainly put her stamp, and I believe has brought Caricom into the fore as a really important actor in terms of the region, and I think that is important.
One very last question, Minister, and this is of course in relation connected to Mia Motley as well. Will your administration support establishing or legalizing or giving status, for that matter, to same-sex civil unions?
This is an issue that has come up in in Guyana's reports before the United Nations, and the first stage is decriminalizing same-sex consensual relations. We tried in the period when we were in government, before we came out of government, to have a parliamentary body and to have hearings on that. And of course, the Christian churches majority of Christian churches were very violently opposed to that. So I think we have to go through the first stage, and that is one, to decriminalize consensual same-sex as an offense in Guyana. That's our first step.
Just to be clear,
before we come to any issue like what you're raising now.
Yeah, that's back on the agenda. That you're saying that's an agenda issue for your administration.
No, what's on the agenda right now is to examine and have consultations on the issue of decriminalizing consensual same-sex relations. That's on the agenda.
With a view to decriminalizing. That's the policy I'm trying to get at.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about, decriminalizing, yes.
Okay. Just to be clear on that. So you're saying, and then after that, you'll see if you could take up the issue of the civil unions issue.
Yeah, we have civil unions in Guyana, just that we don't have same-sex civil unions, but we have law in Guyana that protects civil unions and are recognized in terms of inheritance and death. Right. So that already exists in Guyana. And if the country moves in the policy of same-sex civil unions, then obviously it's a small amendment because our structures, our laws, they are ready.
Any timeline on this effort to decriminalize consensual same-sex?
Consultations, my dear, inclusivity and participation as the Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance. This will be part of my mandate in terms of trying to build consensus on these issues, some of which are very contentious and controversial in our society. I would venture to say that 10 years ago, 9 years ago, an issue such as this was probably much more volatile in terms of reactions from people. I believe in the last 9 years that the issue is not as one that throws people into contortions when they hear about it as they did, years ago. So I think the environment now is more acceptable, more accepting, and more tolerant to such situations. And I hope that in the consultation process that we will be able to reach consensus and to move forward. Because my own personal views I can't give you on the TV. I can't speak. I'm speaking for Guyana and the PPC. But I do believe this is an issue we need to resolve and to, because it's an issue that is, I believe, that should have been resolved long ago.
Yeah. Minister Teixeira, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. I just want one comment, Jovan. Is that how you say your name? When we were talking about the US and stuff like that, I did err not to mention the shipwright agreements which all the Caricom countries signed under duress, I must say, during the Iraq invasion of Iraq by the Americans. And so all of the Caricom countries played a very significant role as a regional body and in opposing that, and also then were influenced to sign the Shipwright Agreement, which Guyana and all the Caricom countries did. The Shipwright Agreement is still in place in Caricom and by all Caricom countries with US administration. So what was signed in Guyana, or what was a continuation of that, or a reaffirmation of that, when Mr. Pompeo was here. Beg your pardon?
You mean commitments to Shipwright were signed?
Shipwright was agreed to since the invasion of Iraq by all the Caricom countries. It was a reaffirmation, because so it's still in place.
Guyana reaffirmed its commitment to Shipwright during the visit the other day.
Yes.
Of Secretary of State
yes.
Pompeo.
Yes.
Okay.
It's a verbal reaffirmation, but it is in place in all the Caricom countries. It has never been removed by any Caricom country or any country, a Caricom member refusing to participate in it, as far as I know. And therefore, all of us are still part of the agreement that we each individually signed with the then US administration. So I did hear you not saying that.
Yes, and I appreciate you mentioning it. But despite these, so you're reaffirming despite the protestations a few decades ago.
Sorry, I didn't. Again, you're muffled.
Reaffirmation despite the protestations a few decades ago.
We may have protested, Jovan, but all the Caricom countries, including Guyana, signed the Shipwright Agreement.
Yeah.
In the face of very serious consequences, and all the Caricom countries were confronted with a raison d'etre that was in the interest of their countries. And so the Shipwright, as far as I know, is in place in all the Caricom countries. Countries have not been called on to implement certain areas of it, but it is still there. And so
the reaffirmation was with or without duress?
Beg your pardon?
The reaffirmation was with or without duress?
I am not aware that there was duress. I'm not aware there's duress. It was not, we were not in the Iraq invasion at the time when Mr. Pompeo visited. This was in a situation where the American administration, with 100 other countries, took a strong position in standing up for democracy in Guyana.
Got it. Thank you very much, Minister Teixeira. I hope I get to speak with you again.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye, Jovan.
Thank you very much.